One of the things I always like to do is have an answer key for the exam. And so we'll go over the questions here in the document camera video format and show you what we're looking for as far as our understanding of different aspects of intro organic chemistry. If you were to try to react ethylene plus lithium amide, also known as lithium NH2, you would start writing the mechanism by doing the complete dot structures for all of the reactants, and that includes all of the atoms and all of the electrons. So ethylene, or ethene, has pKa equal 44. So it's not very acidic, and this typically when you have a salt, the anion is going to be the base. And in the writing of the mechanism, which is the key part of the problem, you're going to want a lone pair on the base to go try to find the most acidic hydrogen on the acid, which all four hydrogens are equivalent, so you could aim your arrow at any of those. This lone pair is going to go try to bond to this hydrogen, and that's going to liberate the bonding electrons so they can be lone electrons in the product. So then you end up with the ethylide, I guess you would call it. I don't know what you would call that, but it's the conjugate base of ethylene, and it's got a negative charge and the liberated pair of electrons. And then the positively charged lithium isn't really doing anything except hanging out with whatever the anion is. So lithium with no electrons is pretty much there and unreactive. So your ethylene gets deprotonated to form its conjugate base, and then after the NH2 minus picks up the H plus, it becomes neutral, and the pKa here equals 35. So what this is telling us is that you started with the less reactive stuff, and so there's no real reason for this base to grab a proton off of this terrible acid when this better base could take the proton off a better acid and react to form the reactants. So if you did, and this happens all the time, if one of these guys did happen to have enough energy and hit the right way to grab that proton and form ammonia, the ammonia would be rapidly deprotonated by the product. So it would return back to the starting materials, which are more stable. So since this is the higher pKa of the acids that are involved, it's going to be more stable, and thus you're going to be reactant favored. So there we go. 3 minutes. Nice answer to this problem. So let's go on to number 2. Number 2 asked about iodopropane. So iodopropane is going to be 3 carbons with an iodine on carbon number 1. So 1 iodopropane. It's going to be an iodine on the first carbon and then 2 other carbons. So now when you think about the Newman projection for this, we're going to draw what things are on the first carbon on the front of the Newman projection. So you have an iodine. That's a sideways iodine. You have an iodine and 2 hydrogens. My brain had leaped forward to the other 2 things I was going to write. But this is a good way to represent what's on the first carbon. It's an iodine and 2 hydrogens, iodine and 2 hydrogens, and these are projecting towards us. On the second carbon, there's 2 hydrogens and a methyl group. If I wanted to do the lowest energy conformation, I would have to put the largest thing on the second carbon as far away from the largest thing on the first carbon as possible, and that would be the anti-staggered configuration which is the lowest energy conformation for this molecule. Now, if I wanted the highest energy, I could draw the front carbon exactly the same, but now we're going to envision the conformational change of the stuff on the back carbon is going to rotate around until there's as much conflict as possible, which would mean the biggest group on the carbon 2 lining up and eclipsing the biggest group on carbon 1. So this would be the fully eclipsed, as some people like to call it, fully eclipsed and highest energy conformation, because now the two biggest groups are closest to each other and do the most bumping. So there we go, another 3 minutes, another nice answer. And we'll stop this video here and pick up the rest of the answer key another time just to make sure this thing doesn't cut out and I can save things in smaller increments.